Welcome, and thank you for joining for another whiskey review. Today, we're going to take a look at a bourbon, Stagg Jr. from Buffalo Trace. Exciting bourbon here, so let me get it poured so it has a chance to open up. This one is a hefty cask strength bottling at 130 proof or exactly 65% ABV. So this is Stagg Jr., not to be confused with George T. Stagg, which by the name Stagg Jr., this kind of tells you a little bit about, this is the younger brother of the George T. Stagg. If you're unfamiliar with these Buffalo Trace offerings, just know that George T. Stagg is probably one of the most sought after bourbons in the world, up there with the Pappy Van Winkles. Very hard to get your hands on. So what they've done is kind of made its younger brother here, the Stagg Jr., which is also pretty hard to get your hands on, but fortunately I know a couple people and I was able to get this bottle on loaner to bring it to you guys. And this particular version, again, is exactly 130 proof or 65% ABV. The reason why I bring that up is this. This whiskey from Buffalo Trace is made in batches. What seems like about twice a year, but I could be mistaken. Sometimes they may bring out, say, 3 batches in a given year. This was actually made after the original George T. Stagg. So to tell you a little bit about that initial one, that particular bourbon is roughly 15 to 18 years old, where its younger brother here is roughly 8 to 9 years old, as far as the whiskey in the bottle. So obviously George T. Stagg, incredibly popular whiskey, to essentially get more product out to the people. They decided to release a younger version of it. So again, this is 8 or 9 year old whiskey as compared to 15 to 18 year old. But cask strength, unfiltered, natural color. Let me see what else I want to say about this one. That's pretty much about it. Oh, it actually has the exact same mash bill as the George T. Stagg, which is mash bill number 1 from Buffalo Trace. So it is a high corn, low rye recipe. So exact same mash bill, similar casks from what I've been able to read, just a little bit less years as opposed to the George T with the Stagg Jr. So the first thing I want to talk about is this dark color, and it is a dark, rich color. And like with all bourbons, this is natural color. So it's a lovely, lovely dark mahogany / reddish hue on this particular bourbon. And it's not only is it a lovely color, but even in the bottle, I think with like the extra black wrap, you can just tell just how dark that whiskey is. Wow. And it's cask strength, so it's probably going to jump out the glass on us. That's also a reason why I want to give it a little bit of a pour. I've had a few drams of this here recently in the last week or so to prepare this video. And this particular whiskey does really benefit from time in the glass. I'm talking 20, 25 minutes in the glass. Now, I want to pour it in front of you, and I'm not going to ramble on for 25 minutes, so we're not going to get quite that amount of time with it, but let me tell you what I'm getting on this one. All right, first, on the nose. Brown sugar. I don't know if I've ever had a whiskey where brown sugar was that prominent on the nose, but you were getting a ton of it in the Stagg Jr. Cherries. Dark or red berries in general, maybe raspberry to go along with that cherry. Ton of cinnamon. You're gonna get that from that rye usually, the spiciness in general from the rye. And it's not just cinnamon, it's clove. Maybe a little bit of chocolate right there at the end. It's oakiness for sure. And just a twinge of like tobacco leaf, just kind of a lingering element. Yeah, but definitely brown sugar, cherries, red berries, raspberries, clove, ton of cinnamon. Go along with that beautiful, beautiful chocolate and oak that just kind of tail in right at the end. Also very sweet. Initially I wasn't really picking up sweet. I know I said brown sugar, but brown sugar is more of a candied type smell as opposed to a caramel sweetness. And there is a little bit of that caramel sweetness in here, but most of the sweetness is the brown sugar. All right, let's give it a sip. Whew. They'll jump up and bite you. It's a strong one. Instantly getting that brown sugar again. That's the first thing that hits. As soon as that brown sugar goes away, cinnamon, bang. A lot of cinnamon. Now I'm gonna add about 8 or 9 drops of water just to kind of open this up a little bit. But neat, brown sugar, cinnamon, a little bit of chocolate kind of comes in on the aftertaste. And now some orange zestiness that I really wasn't getting a lot on the nose, but I get a lot of the orange zestiness on the palate, especially kind of in the mid palate and the finish. It's oily. It's very, very oily and dense of a whiskey, which you would expect out of something that is essentially cask strength. This one again is at 65% ABV. Now, these do come out in batches, so I have seen ones with higher ABV content. Again, very hard to get your hands on. But I want to say the first one I tried was about 134 as far as the proof, where this one's 130 on the mark. I've seen ones 129 to 133-ish a couple times on some of the releases, at least on the secondary market. So this one jumps around, so not every batch is going to be identical. So very similar to, say, the Balvenie Ton 15. Excuse me, not the Ton. The Balvenie Single Barrel 15, whether it's sherry or bourbon cask. Depending on what batch you get, you're going to have subtle differences, but the overall flavor profile should be fairly consistent. And again, I think you're going to get brown sugar. I think you're going to get a little bit of chocolate. I think you're going to get a lot of cinnamon, no matter which batch you taste. But if you're fortunate enough to get your hands on multiple batches, I'm sure you'll be able to pick up the differences in between the two, especially when comparing them side by side. All right, so I added quite a few drops of water. I counted 8 out of the PG here. So about 8 little drops of water, kind of a lot to throw in anything, but again, I'm trying to essentially artificially create time in the glass to give you guys the proper notes as far as smell and taste. So I'm gonna give it a quick swirl, which I don't really like to do a ton, especially a real vigorous swirl. I like to let it sit down a little bit. But the fortunate thing is this bottle is probably, the fill level is about here. So, I might have 25% of the bottle left, 25%. So it's already down to a level to where it's been oxidizing a good amount for the last couple of months. So a little more accessible than it was when I originally tasted it. All right, let's go back to it with a little bit of water, a little bit more time. Let's see if we're picking up anything different. Brown sugar is still the first thing you get. Lovely, lovely, rich brown sugar. Almost like if you go like to Starbucks, you're getting that sugar, like the sugar in the raw, the brown sugar mix. It's a little bit of that. So it's like sugar in the raw with brown sugar mix. The cinnamon is taking a step back with water. Cherries were still there, but again, cherries took a step back. I don't really get the raspberry. I don't really get all the red fruits like I did before. Basically, I'm just getting cherry now, where before I was getting multiple red fruits when it was neat. But the spices have come up. Clove, nutmeg. And there's that chocolatey tobacco leaf, which sort of sounds weird, but I tell you what, it is delicious. And right at the end, that oak from the cask. Again, 8-9-year-old whiskey in this bottle here, so not a super old bourbon, but that's good age for a bourbon. If you're a person who mainly is interested in scotches, know that with bourbons here in the US, they use the virgin cask. So, when Balvenie or Macallan or somebody else ages their whiskey in ex-American bourbon barrels, even if it's a first fill, that is whiskey that's obviously already had American whiskey in it before they use it over there in Scotland. So this is really tearing a lot out of the cask as far as the oakiness. Yeah, I mean, again, with water, as soon as you get past the brown sugar and the sugar in the raw, and as soon as you get past a little bit of the cinnamon, man, that clove and that chocolatey tobacco leaf really come in nice. I've only had George T. Stagg, this is Big Brother, one time. And I really wasn't in an environment where I could appreciate it easily. Certainly did not have it in my house to where I could, sit around, sip on it a few different times, walk outside with it, and kind of really get to know it. It was an incredible whiskey, but I tell you what, this whiskey's got a lot of bang for the buck. If you're fortunate enough to find it retail anywhere here in the States, you're looking at about $70, $75, maybe 80, depending on what state you're in as far as retail. But if you were fortunate enough to ever find it retail, buy every bottle you can, because this one rarely shows up on the shelves. Usually here in the state of Ohio, it's a lottery item, meaning you either show up to a liquor store or you go online and register, and they have so many bottles compared to how many people essentially requested one. So I know last year some of the lotteries, at least for the Pappies, there were roughly, I believe, 12 or 8 bottles, and like 88,000 people applied for one. So you don't have a good chance of winning the lottery, just like with anyone. But that's really the only way you can get your hands on this gem these days, unless you can find it on the secondary market, which is going to cost you quite a bit more. All right, so last sip time with a little bit of water. Let's see what the water and a little bit extra time did to it as far as the palate. On the nose, water took away quite a bit of the cinnamon. On the palate, it exploded with cinnamon. The brown sugar took a step back on the palate with water. Cinnamon really came out strong when you had a few drops of water on this one. It's still oily. And on the aftertaste, I'm getting that chocolate again, really nice chocolate. A little bit of clove. Again, a little bit of that tobacco leaf mixed with oak. Just a really, really rewarding experience, especially for a price point if you can find it around $70, $75. So maybe you're in a part of the world where this is more accessible than it is here in Columbus, Ohio. Unfortunately, my state actually borders Kentucky, and for whatever reason, it feels like we don't ever really get any of the great bourbons around here. Sadly enough, even though we're in Kentucky's backyard, but we got to play the hands that we're dealt. Anyway, I am glad I was able to bring this terrific bourbon to you guys. If you guys have ever tried it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. This is the only bottle I've had to drink on a little bit, so I'm not as versed as maybe some of you are. If you've had multiple bottles, vintages, tell me how this one differs. I tried to figure out when this one was actually bottled. Sadly, I was not able to get any of that information. It does have a bottling code on here, but you know, I didn't see any numbers that repeated or numbers that seemed like it was a date or a particular year. So maybe I'm wrong. A lot of times you guys teach me some things, but as far as the whiskey score on this one is a strong, I don't care what kind of whiskey it is, I'm gonna call it 91 out of 100. It is a very unique experience. I don't care if you think, or if you're a fan of, say, Lagavulin cask strength whiskeys, or the sherry bombs like the Glendronach cask strengths. This one is just as unique of a whiskey experience. It's delicious, it's dessert, it's got a ton of ABV, so you can bring the ABV down as you would like, aside from, or as I should say, instead of letting the distillery decide what ABV you're gonna drink it at. Me personally, I love cask strength whiskeys. I just feel the value that you get for the price that you pay is always a good bet. But even me who like cask strength whiskeys know that this has some bite to it. It's not necessarily alcohol, but the flavors are so rich that it almost kind of wants to drive your nose out of the glass when you're nosing it. But anyway, tell me what you guys think. I'm at a 91 out of 100 on this one. I really, really enjoyed this Stagg Jr. Hope you guys can have a chance to give it a try. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Until next time, I wish you happy drinking. See you next time.